The Roundtable is brought to you over radio station WKSU 89.7 FM today from the Quaker Station on the University of Akron campus in downtown Akron, Ohio. The radio broadcast is underwritten by Cascade Audi. Today's luncheon program is generously sponsored by Akron Community Foundation. Additionally, we would like to recognize the Akron Beacon Journal, Kiwanis Club of Akron, and the Greater Akron Chamber for being legacy sponsors of Akron Roundtable. The Cleveland Clinic Akron General is a title sponsor for this 40th anniversary year of Akron Roundtable. First Energy Foundation and State and Federal Communications are presenting sponsors for 2016. Please mark your calendars now for our next roundtable scheduled on Thursday, April 21st, when the Akron Roundtable will host Bloomberg News New York Bureau Chief Jason Kelly, who will moderate a conversation with Executive Chairman of Eros International, Kishore Lula. Eros International is an Indian motion picture production and distribution company based in Mumbai. The title of the presentation is Media and Content, Past, Present, and Future. To make a reservation for any of the Akron Roundtable lunches or to purchase a subscription to our luncheon series, please visit our website at akronroundtable.org. Today, the Akron Roundtable is pleased to host Mrs. Dorothy Ridings, the first speaker in our Signature series of speakers. The Signature series invites speakers from each of Akron Roundtable's 4 decades to return to the Akron Roundtable podium. Dot actually spoke to Akron Roundtable in both our first and third decades of Akron Roundtable, initially as the president of the League of Women Voters of the United States in 1983, and again in 1997 as the president and chief executive officer of the Council on Foundations. Ms. Ridings serves on the Commission for Presidential Debates among a host of other activities. I'll now ask John Paturas, President and CEO of Akron Community Foundation and member of the Akron Roundtable Board of Directors, to introduce Dorothy Ridings. John?
Thank you, Steve. I didn't realize that Dot had been here 2 other times, so I just leaned over and said, third time's the charm. So we'll have high expectations today. Dorothy Dot Ridings has had a very extensive and successful career that began as a feature writer and a political reporter for the Charlotte Observer, and has included positions as a college instructor, an adjunct professor, TV producer and host, news editor, publisher and president of the Bradenton Herald, as well as president and CEO of the Council on Foundations for nearly a decade. She earned her journalism degree from the Medill School of Journalism at Northwestern University and her master's from the University of North Carolina. She has received numerous honorary degrees and countless awards and recognition, including Who's Who of America and America Women Awards, and a Power and Influence Top 50 Nonprofit Leader presented by the Nonprofit Times. She was actually elected to the Medill School of Journalism's Hall of Fame at Northwestern University, and also received a Distinguished Alumni Award from the University of North Carolina. As we all know and we see from the material at our tables, Dorothy is a member of the Commission on Presidential Debates and a former trustee of the Ford Foundation and the Foundation Center, and currently serves as a trustee and director of the Community Foundation of Louisville and the University of Charleston in West Virginia. She's also a former president of the National League of Women Voters. She has had volunteer roles in countless organizations where she's lived and worked and raised her 2 sons. These include the YWCA, the Junior League, Leadership Louisville, Leadership Kentucky, the United Way, the Louisville Forum, a very similar group to our very own Akron Roundtable, the National Civic League, as well as the independent sector. And I hope you will join me in presenting a warm Akron welcome to Dot Ridings. Thank you.
to begin today by saying what an honor it is to be here, which is, how speeches traditionally begin. And then I was going to tell you that I've been here before, once, twice, and this is the third time. It's already been said what I spoke about and so forth. So it is an honor to be invited back, especially a third time. So thank you. 3 times. Those of you who attended either of the previous appearances heard me talk about, in 83, when I was president of Legal and Voters, I talked about the gender gap, which was kind of a new rising thing at the time. And then when I was back in 97, when I was at the Council on Foundations, I talked about the intergenerational transfer of wealth. Well, both of those things are still with us, as is the civic interest that brought me to my third visit with the Akron Roundtable. That is the general election presidential debates that serve such an important role in the process of giving job interviews for those who seek the presidency of the United States. Now, I don't need to tell you here, I don't need to tell a soul in the United States, and maybe even the world, that process is already underway for 2016. We've certainly seen that ad nauseum. Those are the primary debates that are sponsored by the political parties and media outlets. So my remarks today have nothing to do with those things. We all have our own opinions, but I'm here to talk about what's ahead of us, what's coming down the pipe. Now, I can amplify on the differences between those primary debates and the general election debates during the question and answer period, if that's what you would like to hear. But right now, I want to focus specifically on the general election debates process that's beginning, or has already begun, to be held this fall from the perspective of someone who is a member of the Commission on Presidential Debates. There are 16 of us. And who has a background with the League of Women Voters, which was an early sponsor that built those debates into an integral part of the general election. Now, first, a bit of background. I'm delighted there are students in the room. We all are students of this process, but we need to know the background in order to understand the present and the future. Now, televised debates in general elections for the presidency date back to 1960, which most of you have heard or read about, even if you weren't born by then. There were 4 debates between John Kennedy and Richard Nixon, and they took place due to several factors. In addition to the fact that, if you think about it, there was a relatively new widespread availability and accessibility of television in the homes by that time. First, Congress approved a temporary suspension of the then existing equal time provision of the Federal Communications Act. Otherwise, the networks would have had to provide equal time, or more accurately, equal opportunity, to the scores of others who were running for president. Second, the 3 then dominant television networks agreed to work together in staging the 4 debates, which is an amazing collaboration if you think about it, in which they shared studios, news personnel, and technical teams. Third, and most important, both Kennedy and Nixon agreed to participate, each believing there was an advantage for them in participating. Remember, this was the first election since the incumbent president could not run for re-election due to the ratification of the 22nd Amendment in 1951. So it was a watershed time. So both Kennedy and Nixon were brand new participants at a highest level of political candidacy. Now, Nixon, of course, came to regret his participation, and when he subsequently was elected president in 1968, he vetoed a bill that would have permanently repealed the FCC's equal time provisions. Then for the next 3 elections, those conditions did not exist, and there were no presidential debates. The new era of presidential debates in the general election began in 1976, when the League of Women Voters stepped in. The League had a history of sponsoring presidential debates, actually political debates of all stripes, carried on the radio dating back to 1928. And it believed there was a great need for more extensive voter education through including information that could be gleaned only, really, by candidates addressing the same issues on the same stage, face to face, in their forums and debates. So after much discussion and frankly lobbying, the Federal Communications Commission adopted what was called the Aspen ruling, which allowed candidate debates to be sponsored by nonpartisan, non-broadcast organizations. That opened the door for the League sponsorship. I joined the National Board of the League in the summer of 1976. So I was there when those debates were negotiated and arranged in 1976, 1980, and 1984. Debates have been a part of presidential elections ever since, and most observers believe they are now institutionalized as part of these campaigns. Now, there's still an evolutionary development, and a lot of that has to do with the growth of social media. But they are, and I'm convinced will remain, a core part of presidential campaigns into the future. Now, from 1976 on, legal challenges to the debates were numerous, but in every case, the sponsor, either the League of Women Voters or the Commission on Presidential Debates, has emerged the victor. There are many other good sources, terrific sources of information about this, and I was going to give you some, but for interest of time, I'll provide them to you later if you wish. And now the Commission is deep into the planning for the presidential debates this fall, with the first one scheduled for September 26th to be held just down the road in Dayton. Coincidentally, that will be 56 years to the day of the first Kennedy-Nixon debate in 1960. Two additional presidential debates are scheduled, October 9th in St. Louis and October 19th in Las Vegas, with the vice presidential debate scheduled on October 4th in Farmville, Virginia. Arrangements with those who meet the criteria to participate will begin once we know who is eligible to participate. And that, of course, is the hottest of topics. Not just this year, but it is a hotter one this year, perhaps, than ever before. Who will be invited? The Commission has again set its criteria, which require that a candidate be constitutionally eligible for election, that a candidate be on the ballot in enough states to make possible a majority vote in the Electoral College, and that the candidate has a level of public interest and support of at least 15% in the national electorate, as determined by 5 selected national public opinion polling organizations of the highest stripe. The criteria will be applied prior to each debate. Now, the criterion of assessment of public interest and support has been the most contentious in the entire history of presidential debates sponsored by both the League and the Commission. The Federal Election Commission requires that participation decisions be based on, quote, pre-established objective criteria, end quote. And I can tell you that thousands of hours and many good minds have spent time on determining how best to judge public interest and support and translate it to potential participants. The 15% criterion is far from perfect, far from ideal, but is the best fit that many minds have come up with. Now, I'm typically asked by audiences why the League and the Commission just haven't invited anybody who's filed to run for the presidency. Well, let me tell you, that's an easy one to answer. When I began preparing my remarks for this event about a week ago, by that time, 1,627 individuals had filed statements of candidacy with the Federal Election Commission. Well, now, obviously, that wouldn't work. As has been proven in this year's series of primary debates, you can't have a meaningful debate when the participants are even much, much fewer than 1,627. More crucial, remember there is no requirement for a candidate to participate in a debate. President Carter, who was incumbent president in 1980, famously refused the League's invitation to participate in a debate with Ronald Reagan and John Anderson, the 2 other candidates who met the participation criteria. And he said much later that he thought that had severely damaged his campaign by refusing to appear. They can refuse to participate, and that largely defeats a goal of providing important information to the electorate. Now, Carter, went on to participate in a subsequent debate with Ronald Reagan later that year, but many people believe he was really on a downhill trajectory by then, as he had predicted. And I mentioned John Anderson, whose name comes up whenever I get a question about participation in debates by others than the nominees of the two major political parties. He did participate in that first presidential debate of 1980, but for subsequent debates, his level of public interest and support no longer qualified him by the 15% rule. And you'll probably also remember Ross Perot, an independent candidate who met the criteria and participated in 3 presidential debates in 1992. Had there been presidential debates in 1968, George Wallace would have met the criteria for participation. So there is no truth that the criteria used by the League and the Commission closed the door to independents or nominees of any political party. I mentioned earlier that legal challenges to the debates have been many through the years, and the most vocal in this election has been from a group that wants an automatic invitation for an independent candidate to be chosen by such things as internet votes. Now, the proposal is broader than that, but the Commission believes that criteria it is using provide ample opportunity for any candidate, regardless of party or non-party affiliation, to participate without being so inclusive as to jeopardize the voter education purposes of the debates by including candidates with only modest levels of support. And so we head to the 2016 general election debates, which may be even more vital for voter education this year than in the history of televised presidential debates. It's hard work, folks, especially for a small staffed, not-for-profit organization like the Commission on Federal Debates. I'll be glad to amplify on that again during the question portion if you like. But as I began these remarks with telling you what an honor it is, I'm reminded we're taught in speaker training sessions to leave your audiences with a smile. Believe it or not, there is much to smile about when I look back at my 40-year involvement in presidential debates. But one of them takes the prize, and I will leave you with that one. The year was 1984, and as president of the National League of Women Voters, I was deep in the planning for the debates we planned to hold that fall. In choosing the dates for the debates, we had combed the calendar for religious holidays, World Series, and all kinds of political events that had already been scheduled. Well, Monday Night Football was well known in the league office, but we'd missed any notice of a Sunday night game on October 21st. Shortly after, we held a press conference to announce the dates of the presidential and vice presidential debates. I returned to my office at the league, and the phone was ringing. It was Ed Joyce, president of the news division of ABC. And his first words were, "Well, you've just cost ABC $1 bazillion. Now, he didn't say bazillion, but you got it. I asked him why, and he pointed out that the presidential debate we had announced for Kansas City was in direct conflict, both day and time, with the ABC televised broadcast of an NFL game between the Dallas Cowboys and the New Orleans Saints. The monetary loss involved ABC's contract with the NFL to carry the game. The moral loss, he said, was that there was no way ABC could refuse to carry a presidential debate in order to carry a football game. The public relations blowback would be horrendous. I told him I'd call him right back. I needed to confer with the league's debate staff. We all agreed there was no way we could allow the direct conflict to occur. While we were, of course, sympathetic to ABC's conundrum, we were worried most of all about damage to the very reason we were sponsoring debates, to allow the widest spectrum of the American electorate to view the meeting of the major candidates in a live discussion of policy issues. So I called Ed Joyce back. Our debate was scheduled for 90 minutes, beginning at 8 p.m. Eastern Time, or 7 p.m. Central Time, where Kansas City was located. The football game kickoff was scheduled for those same times, with the game being played in Dallas, which is also Central Time. Suggestion: what if we started our debate an hour earlier than announced, and they began their football game an hour later than scheduled? Fine, he said, but the NFL is never allowed to change in the time of the game due to contractual obligations and other logistical concerns. Hang on again, I said, I'll call you back. So I called Pete Rozelle, the commissioner of the National Football League. I explained the situation, and he said it sounded like a good solution to him. What a nice man. So I called Ed Joyce back. This is all taking place within about 10 minutes. I told him Rizal had agreed to the compromise. There was a long silence. And Ed Joyce said, "Lady, you just climbed the glass mountain in carpet slippers." 5 minutes later, as we were preparing an addendum to our press release announcing the dates and times of the debates, my phone rang again. It was a reporter for Sports Illustrated who said, "I've just heard the most unbelievable story. What's the real story?" And that is the real story on the only schedule change in history for a National Football League game outside of tornadoes and other natural disasters. Our debate took place from 8 to 9 p.m., 9:30 p.m. Eastern Time, and the Cowboys-Saints game in Dallas began its pregame ceremony at 9:45 p.m. Eastern. By the way, Dallas won, but so did the American public. I haven't checked the NFL schedule for this fall, but I know the staff of the Commission on Presidential Debates has. And now I'll be glad to take your questions.
Thank you, Dot. That was wonderful. Ms. Ridings has graciously agreed to respond to questions submitted by the audience. You may still send your questions electronically via your mobile devices using the Quail technology, and instructions for using the Quail technology can be found in the brochures at your table. You may also submit written questions using the note cards provided at each of the tables. Please raise those cards to be collected, and Karen Lefton, owner and principal attorney at the Lefton Group LLC and member of the Akron Roundtable Board of Directors, will present your questions. Karen?
Isn't she truly delightful? What a joy to have her kick off. When Dot was talking about the 1984 presidential debates, she neglected to mention the time there was a debate in Louisville, and she had introduced Barbara Walters as the moderator, and Barbara Walters was introducing the panelists. They were reporters Diane Sawyer, Fred Barnes, and James Weigert. And then she said that up until then, there had never been a problem with selecting the questioners for the debates. And that for that day, both Reagan and Mondale had been offered a list of 100 reporters in the national media, and they could only come up with 3 that they agreed on. So the question for her from the audience, and I personally want to know as well, is how have things changed, and what guidelines are put in place to ensure that the panelists' questions are objective and free from their own personal bias?
Thank you. And that's an excellent question whoever asked it. That's a great question. And things really have changed. Just as with any relatively new activity, as presidential debates were beginning back in those days, before then, we learned from our past. We made a mistake in the 1985 and 1984 in that we did not want to have well, first of all, we couldn't get agreement to have a single moderator. We tried, and nobody would buy that. So we went back to the panel to which the candidates were accustomed. And we wanted to make sure that there was not a questioner who either of the candidates, or if there was a third one, felt was so biased that it would interfere with their participation in the debate. So we did send the list of our suggested panelists to the candidates who were invited to participate. And they had no problems with 3. The 4th one was a sticking point. And it did get bizarre. It got really bizarre. It went beyond even good courtesy. So we went with 3 panelists and a moderator instead. Now, that's very different now. For one thing, as I say, we learn, and the commission has learned, that that's not a good thing to do. The invitations that are extended to the participants say, here is who the moderator is going to be, and it is a single moderator. We've gotten to that point, and it's worked beautifully for the past. It allows the panelists don't get into little, setting themselves up for attention, shall I put it that way. So we choose well-experienced. The longest moderator has been Jim Lair, who's now serving on the Commission on Residential Debates. He is retired, as you know, you watch NewsHour, but that's a good example. So there is just a moderator, and we do not negotiate any of those things. We had to learn that, and it was during the league's time as debates that we learned an awful lot. That was a big one.
So another thing the audience would like to know is what we have learned about the value that a vice presidential candidate debate would have. What is the overall value of what you're doing in having the vice presidential debate?
Interestingly, we found in the past, I don't know if this is still true or not, but we found in the past that the American public is kind of deaf about vice presidential nominees. Of course, the presidential nominees choose their vice presidential partners, and they are ratified by their conventions if they are a party candidate, not if there's no party involved. But we found that the American public is woefully ignorant of who these people are. So it really is all, in their case, it's almost to say, here it is, here he or she is, and to introduce them as a partner for the election with the nominee that they are running with.
So sticking on debates for a while and the process for that, can you explain what input or whether the commission has input into the specific questions and how, as you select the moderator, you're able to actually help guide policy and procedure as well?
That's another good one. I'm going to expand that to cover a few other things, but I suspect they may come up with questions as well. First of all, the Commission on Presidential Debates is an independent organization, and the way it works is in terms of all material aspects of the debates. We announced places and dates. We asked for bids for university campuses and colleges, which is where we want to sponsor them, for thinking that adds a lot to the voter education process. So candidate selection criteria, moderator selection, format, dates and locations are announced by the Commission on Presidential Debates. It's agreed or not. We've not had any problem with that, although we've learned, again, you heard me talk about the year when Carter refused, but that was a different reason, and he suffered from that. He lost from that experience. We do work on the commission with all the involved constituencies, the networks, other media, the candidates, and others to ensure that there's an orderly and effective event being produced. We do not negotiate any of the terms that go to the basic integrity of the event as a voter education event designed for the public and not for the candidates. Directly to the question, the only person who knows the questions that will be asked in advance is the moderator. Now, I can't tell you about pillow talk. I can't guarantee that. But I can tell you we don't, the candidates don't, the networks don't, the media don't, the campaigns don't. It is left up. That's why the moderator choice is so very, very vital, and we've been very lucky to have some very, very good ones.
Can you say who the moderators are going to be in September and October this year?
If I knew them, I wouldn't tell you, but we have not selected the moderators yet. We've used a single moderator ever since 1992, and that has seemed to work really, really well. But it takes a lot of attention to these people and who they are and their background and how they are viewed by the American public. And so, as I say, I wouldn't tell you if I knew them, but I don't know them. Not yet. We haven't chosen them yet.
Now, Dot, you've mentioned that Jimmy Carter did refrain from participating, or at least initially he did, and I think many of us know in the news that Donald Trump the other day had said that he was unavailable for the debate that had been scheduled for Monday, and I think everyone knows now that debate has been canceled. So the question from the audience is, what do you make of Donald Trump's refusal to participate in another primary debate? And politics aside, who would you like to participate in the general election debates?
I'll answer the end of that first. I would like to see as participants in the general election presidential debates the candidates who meet constitutional obligations on sufficient number of states to make an electoral college vote necessary, and who meet the level of public interest and support, at least 15%. I think there was other parts of the question, though. I'm beginning to kind of forgot what it was.
What do you make of his team?
Oh, the dancing. This gives me a chance to say, I am so glad we don't do primary debates. I told you earlier that the commission learned a lot from the league's experience. The league did sponsor primary debates. Nobody was doing them. And at that time, the broadcast entities couldn't, and the parties couldn't. So it was either the league or a like organization, or not having any at all. So we did do primary debates. I remember them well. And we did not have any contentious participation that I can recall. I hope I haven't just blotted it out of my memory. But again, I'm going to leave that up to the primary debate sponsors and the candidates to decide. The candidates do have free will. They can always refuse to participate. We've known that at any level. And that's up to them to decide what is in their best interest. And I don't have the wisdom enough to provide anybody any advice on that score. But we'll see how that turns out.
Is it safe to say that since you've disclosed to us today the debate dates in September and October, that all the candidates already know, so that they should pat it on their calendar if they're intending? Yes, okay. So nobody's going to schedule a speech for somewhere else?
Not that we know of. They do have the dates, the times, the places. We've never had to change one for that reason. As I told you, the only change in history has been that one that involved the National Football League.
And finally, just one more on the debates, and that is, what do they cost and who pays for them?
And I thought there this morning, I wish I knew exactly what our total budget was, and I can't remember, but they're expensive. And we raise money for them. The Commission on Presidential Debates wasn't appointed by anybody. It really grew out of a feeling on the part of people who've been involved in politics for a long time that there had to be growth in the process. There had to be the learning that was provided through the League of Women Voters debates, and it had to be strong enough to be able to resist any refusals to accept a panelist, so forth. And that's exactly what has evolved. The Commission on Presidential Debates is a 501c3 organization. You can contribute to it. We have 2 full-time staff. We have, of course, we engage production teams, and they're the most experienced that anybody could wish for. We also do a lot of international work, for those of you who are interested. Go on the website. This is one of the places I was going to recommend that you go to look, debates.org, and that's the Commission on Presidential Debates website. And that we do, it's very, very interesting. We're being watched around the world. A lot of emerging democracies have actually come to us, and we've had events for them here, and we've gone to other places to help them structure what fit their own system in terms of public debates. I love that. That's part of my heart, to see that happening around the world. And there's some wonderful stories about that don't get told very often. So check out the website and you'll see. Did I cover? Okay.
So I'd like to just shift for a moment now from your career as the debate planner to your career in journalism as a publisher. You started as a reporter, and I think your interest in democracy and community go hand in hand in your careers. This is a question that comes from a very high-ranking editor at our local newspaper who shall remain unnamed, but I know who it is because I'm reading it. And there's been a push in the local community for civility in politics. And that has been one of the things that the local newspaper, used to be a neighborhood paper, cares very deeply about, because politics has become so uncivil. We can talk about the national races in a minute. But the question is, if you were assigned today to cover civility in politics, are there any assumptions you can make regarding what Americans believe to be proper behavior? And if not, how would you decide what stories to do? How do you cover the kind of language that has come out of the presidential?
That's a toughie. And I'll just show you how much of a Luddite I am to say that I'm glad I had my journalism career before there was social media. When I was publisher in Florida, at the Bradenton Herald, the neighborhood paper, where I knew many Akron Beacon Journal people, we were sister papers, you might remember. That was my first use of a computer in those years. I mean, yeah, I'm old, okay. But think what has happened in terms of the use of electronics and social media. And a lot of that I fear. I'm not an expert in this field, though. I fear, though, that a lot of what you're talking about has been fostered by indiscriminate use of social media. I'm intrigued by some of the legal debates that are going on, and I frankly don't know whose side I am on. And I think some here and some there, in terms of the rights of privacy, the rights of national security, the needs for national security. You all know what I'm talking about. And I'm really struggling with that now. So it's just almost the same thing. How do you stop, or how do you rein in this uncivil attitude that seems to be permeating our media in particular? And you related it to the media stories. The newspaper business has, going way, way, way down. I know that you all experienced it here, as most all newspaper towns have. And I just have to think they wouldn't be assigning any stories on covering civility. But if you're doing it here, I'm all for it. And I want to see what you turn up. Because this is a big issue. It's facing journalism schools. It's facing a lot of journalism media. Columbia Journalism Review, you know all the, I don't need to recite all those. It's something we're really struggling with in the media, and the media's got to win this one. Got to win this one.
So if you could give advice to the media here today to win that one, what are the top 3 things you would do if you were still a publisher in order to ensure that they're able to cover politics appropriately, fairly, and to not get in the gutter, which is where so much of it has been?
Does she treat all your speakers this way? I tell you, that's a tough one. 3 things. And it has been flowing through my mind a lot because I don't know what to do about it. And I'm not in the journalism field anymore, not even teaching it anymore. It's tough. But I do think that there has been excess on some of the extremes that are not the news. They're ratings chasers, but they're not news. I mean, I have to tell you, I was spending the night here last night. I was in a hotel and I had 2 hours this morning after I got up and got ready to come, and I was flipping back and forth between CNN, Fox News, MSNBC, and they were all on the same topics over and over and over and over with the same crawls. I mean, I got really tired of hearing about riots and who said what, and how, I just got really fed up with it. So I think the responsible media is probably going to have to, may I say it, have a come to Jesus meeting. At least that's what we're saying in the Presbyterian Church. They're going to have to get together and figure out how we do our jobs without being so exceptionally vehement in covering the ratings games, which is where a lot of that stuff comes from. I don't have an answer. I don't have a 1, I don't have a 2, I don't have a 3. But I do see it as one of the biggest challenges we got, and you've just interested me in becoming more active in dealing with that, because I want to do what I can, because I think it's important for me, my family, my grandchildren, for all of you high school kids who are here. So thank you for that. I'm going to get on the case. Thank you.
And we'll probably have her back a fourth time to but I just need to wrap up because we're out of time with one softball. Here's the softball for you, Dot. And the question from the audience is, if we want to host a debate in Akron, how do we go about doing it? Is knowing you going to be enough, or do we have to...
No, I get to answer that question, ask that question on. First, the Commission on Presidential Debates loves to do these things on college and university campuses. We've done all of them on campuses so far, and that will continue to be the case as far as I know, unless something dramatic changes between now and then. They've been wonderful. Those environments have been terrific. When I was president of the league, we did a few on college campuses, others in big auditoriums, but I can tell you campuses have got it all over the other venues. And it puts those students to work, They get involved. I've seen it. I've seen it happen. So I hope that'll happen. Now, what you need to do is go on the website, make sure you're alert. Now, it's too late for this year. We've already done that. But I think about 2 years from now is when we issue an invitation for bids. And it's published pretty widely, at least on the website. You're going to have to keep looking, and we'll try to remember to tell you. I'll try to remember to remind myself to do that. But there is a deadline. What you want to do together is to pull together a group who, I guess the University of Akron, you've got a lot of other colleges and universities around. We're going to be in Dayton at Wright State this year. But put together a package. What you see on the web will tell you everything you need to know. And it does require you to promise certain things, and it calls on the city and the city leaders and the business communities to step up to the plate too, because it costs a bunch of money. I've forgotten what the title is, but we ask you to guarantee that you can raise, and we will help you raise. I'll say, I'm going to risk $1.25 million, I think. Don't hold me to that. I'm not sure. But I have to tell you, you talk to some of these colleges and universities, they didn't have any problem. They didn't. Their convention visitors bureaus, their leading business sources and so forth, we've never had any trouble of anybody raising that money. Now, we do raise independent funds as well, but we need you all to guarantee that you can provide volunteers. You can almost imagine it, because I'm talking about a small staffed organization, not-for-profit, that does all this, and we need to do it with the community, and it turns into a big community event. You have to meet some criteria. You have to be able to get in and out of the city, get some, there has to be enough flights or trains or something. There has to be enough hotel rooms. I hear you're getting a new hotel. A bunch of things that you have to meet certain levels that you have nothing to do with other than either exists or it doesn't. But the biggest thing is the community commitment, both monetarily, as volunteers, as participants. And then you put in your bid, keep your fingers crossed, and then we choose. Oh, then we send out technical teams to come, and they come and visit you, spend a lot of time with you about how this would work. Anyway, but then we make our decision, we announce it, and that's it. Thank you. Thank you all so much.
Don, thank you so much for being with us today. What a great kickoff to our signature series of speakers. We appreciate your poise and your grace and your humor, and just a wonderful presentation for Akron Roundtable. On behalf of Akron Roundtable, it's my pleasure to present you with a contemplative sun. This celebratory work of art was designed exclusively for the Akron Roundtable by local Akron artist and craftsman Don Brown. Jokes me up. Excuse me. Thank you so much. Please join me in thanking you. We look forward to all of you joining us again at the Quaker Station on the University of Akron campus in downtown Akron on Thursday, April the 21st